Attachment to what? Your most important map of the world, part one. There will probably be a part two, maybe a part three on this. We're going to be talking about attachment theory and attachment styles. One of the most critical things to understanding the human. It would certainly be in an owner's manual, and that is indeed the conceit of this channel, Open Source Owners. Hi, my name is Jesse. We talk about what if humans had an owner's manual. Well, the attachment process would definitely be in that owner's manual. It's super fascinating. In my opinion, it should be taught in schools to everybody because it's so critical to how we develop and how our relationships unfold over time. Okay, the first thing to understand is we call these things attachment maps because in the human brain, especially when you're a little baby, you do not have a map yet of the world and whether the world is safe, whether the world is dangerous, whether you're going to speak English, whether you're going to speak Chinese. You just don't know the world yet. And the process of human development is basically mapping the world based upon our formative years. And that, of course, depends on who is our primary caregivers. Are we in a tribe? Are we not in a tribe? Are we in a war-torn country? Are we not? So, from ages 6 months to 2 years, humans develop their attachment model based on primary caregivers. So that's typically mom or dad, but it could just be a single family home, could be auntie, uncle. It's like who was there with you and for you, to primarily take care of you. Not who was there occasionally, but who was there day in and day out. Even if they weren't great at it, let's say, they are still your primary caregiver. And as a child, they're helping reflect into your psyche the map of the world. But also, attachment styles are really formed by the conditions of the world that you live in. So if you grew up as a child in a war-torn country, let's say you're hearing bombs go off and people crying all the time and you're losing family members. Well, you don't understand what's going on. You definitely pick up that the world is a scary place. You are literally picking up signals from the interoception through the polyvagal system. That's a whole other video. But you're picking up through your nervous system that the world is dangerous. And that informs your attachment style. The primary feature of your attachment style and really what attachment theory is all about is, whether or not the young child, the developing child, remember this starts from 6 months to 2 years, it's finished. This map is created by 2 years of age. And I should say, 75% of adults will die with the same attachment map that was formed in their brain at age 2. So that's a profound map that sort of like we carry with us through the rest of our lives, unless we learn how to change it or we learn maybe it's not serving us anymore. That's kind of the idea. It's not to sort of say it's bad to have certain attachment formations. Rather, it is to say, hey, that was a survival mechanism in my early childhood and through my teen years, but it no longer serves me, or somehow it does a disservice to me. It's maybe making my relationships fail more often, or maybe making me struggle with intimacy or emotional vulnerability or connection with my children, for instance, right? So that map gets formed really early and it really doesn't change unless we purposely change it. Now, the step to changing it is this step here. You have to have education. You have to know about attachment and attachment maps in your brain in order to ever change them, right? But anyway, the two primary things that the attachment is based on, and this is also what the polyvagal system is based on. So these two, polyvagus and the attachment model, go really hand in hand together. Are safety signals or danger signals? That's pretty much it. Are we getting more danger signals, more confusing, more chaotic signals, more neglect signals, or are we getting more comforting, soothing, celebrating, and supporting signals? That's pretty much the map that we're trying to figure out about the world. And when we do that, we develop into the 4 types of attachment, what we'll get into next. So there is one type of attachment that's called secure, and then there's 3 that are called insecure. And obviously, if you have a preponderance of danger signals, you're going to develop one of the 3 insecure maps in your brain. If you have a preponderance of safety signals and soothing and connection, then you will probably most likely develop a secure attachment model in your brain. We'll talk more about that in a second. From age 0 to 3, the young child really has no self-soothing ability. They don't really know how to regulate emotions. They don't really know how to get their needs met other than through very basic things like screaming to get their basic needs met. And that's very effective. So it's really critical then that the primary caregivers model how to soothe and model how to regulate and are not, causing disruptions in the child. The child is already in a vulnerable state of potential disruptions. If they don't get their needs met, they only have 1 or 2 sort of strategies to get their basic primary needs met, or they will not live, right? So the child really needs the parent, the primary caregiver, to model to them how to be healthy, how to be happy, how to get their needs met, etc. That is how attachment maps get made. Soothing fear for children then must come from the primary caregivers, as I said. Now, how do they do that? They send safety signals to the nervous system of the child. It's really picked up by the polyvagus system of the human body, the vagal nerve and its two distinct branches are picking up these safety signals or danger signals. But the safety signals look like this: smiling. One of the things that the vagus nerve controls is facial gestures, facial movements, whether you smile or frown, whether your eyes look happy or down, and also your hearing, your inner ear hearing. So babies are picking up things like touch. Is the touch gentle, or is it violent? Lullaby tones of voice, like mother ease, as sometimes it is called, where it's sort of a sing-songy lullaby phrase that is soothing, and it connotes to the child safety. Oh, okay, I'm being soothed, there's no danger. Eye contact is really critical for this. And attention, of course. So the baby's crying, then the baby, without too much time elapsing, the baby expects evolutionarily, and indeed, most primary caregivers will show up for that baby and give them the attention they need, whether it's like reflecting back to them excitement, or just soothing them, or just sort of like being with them, etc. So soothing must come from primary caregivers. If it's super inconsistent, the baby is going to pick up sort of fundamental danger signals, and it'll shape their attachment model. Now, as a parent, you do not have to be perfect at this, so don't worry about it too much. Like, you just have to, generally speaking, send more safety signals than danger signals. You have to generally be reliable, and the child sort of knows what to expect with you. You have to generally be able to model emotional regulation and emotional control to that child. And then you pretty much did it. You don't have to be perfect. You can mess up. You can yell at your child occasionally. I mean, obviously, don't. But if you do, it's not like you're immediately ruining their attachment style. Okay, so the attachment style has been sort of coded or wired into our autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system has those two branches, which are sympathetic and parasympathetic. One way to just think about this is like your brain, spine, gut, and heart, your breathing apparatus, all that is connected into your nervous system. Let's just call it that. I mean, you have a central nervous system too, which is obviously really important. And you have other enteric nervous systems and whatnot. But when I say the nervous system, I really refer to whether you're in a sympathetic mode, like immobilized, you got a lot of energy, that's called fight and flight, or you're in a parasympathetic mode, which is immobilized, sort of like freeze and dissociate in the negative side, and rest and digest in the positive side. Either way, our brain is coding into our nervous system, into how our heart reacts, our gut reacts, our breathing reacts, our nerves are alert or whether they get to relax. And then that coding from age 2 on, it basically gets reenacted through our relationships. With our primary relationships, like our lovers, our partners, our friends, our coworkers, our children, all human interactions are played out and reenacted through the attachment style and through our attachment system. So this is why it's so critical, right? It affects literally every relationship you have. It definitely affects your ability to be, and I don't want to put a judgment on this, but to being a really good parent or a primary caregiver, or maybe not. It really, really affects your intimate relationships. I mean, you can't really expect to have unaddressed attachment issues, or people who have experienced at a young age and coded into their nervous system that other people are not safe, and then expect to have a healthy relationship that is really vibrant and is long-term and all that sort of thing. So there are two types of attachment maps, right? Secure and insecure. We kind of talked about those in a second. And the three insecure ones are called anxious, dismissing, and disorganized. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video a little bit more in detail. And then in the next videos, we'll talk about, like, what are the parents doing? What are the primary caregivers doing to set these things up in the first place? And then what does it look like as adults later? And like, how can we then reshape our attachment map if we so choose? Okay, so secure attachment. One very simple way to think about this is you have a positive view of self and you have a positive view of others. So if you are emotionally upset, if you get broken up with, or you get fired from a job or something, you internally, of course, you're going to feel sad about that. You're going to grieve that loss, but internally, you have it within your very essence that you'll get through it. It'll be a hard time, but then you'll grow, you'll learn your lessons, you'll improve, you'll actually maybe even be stronger in the future because of what you went through. You'll be a better partner, a better worker, etc. Now, on the other hand, you believe and trust in the other. So if you are with a partner or in a friendship or with your child, you expect, if you have a secure attachment map, that if you talk to them and say, hey, what you did really offended me, or like, I'd like to set a boundary with you, you expect that the other person will essentially respect you. And so that is the primary feature. You believe good of the other. You believe that if you express your true needs, they will listen to you and they will be met. But you also are confident in yourself. You don't rely completely on other people to build your sense of self-esteem or your sense of happiness or sense of safety in the world. So this is kind of what I already said. You can self-soothe, you can regulate your own emotional disruptions, as we sort of talked about. Okay, so what about the insecure ones? So these are the 3 insecure ones. There's anxious, preoccupied. Now, the naming of these gets a little confusing. There's different names when you're below 18. There's different names when you're an adult. It gets a little confusing. So even sometimes the adult attachment frameworks are different. People will use different names for these adult models. So the word anxious is the one I want you to focus on. Don't worry about the preoccupied. Just say there's an anxious attachment style, okay? And that is sort of like, in a very nutshell, it's a negative sense of self and a positive sense of other. So these people tend to be codependent with the other. They want the other person to feed back onto themselves that they're okay, that everything's fine. And if the other person's upset, then they are upset, right? They're going to try to soothe the other person. They're going to try to tend to the other person's needs and sort of neglect their own needs. And that's because internally, at a deep core level, they don't trust themselves. If they got broken up with, if they lose a job, they feel often devastated, just shattered, millions of pieces. They feel like there's no way I'll ever be able to put all these pieces back together. That type of thing, right? People with the anxious attachment style often just feel like a bubbling background vibe of anxiety. If you always feel anxious, just in general, and somebody says, "Why are you anxious?" and you're like, "I don't know. There's no particular reason I'm anxious," that might indicate that you have an anxious attachment style. Now, there's more to look into. That's not the only way to understand that. But that's a good way to understand. I've always been anxious as long as I remember. Then that is a good indicator that the reason for that is something that was coded into you at age 2. And I'll say again and again, you did not choose what was coded into you at age 2. You were just trying to navigate your world, and your body was just trying to keep you alive. So it was a coping strategy, it was a survival mechanism, and it was intelligent. Your body did something super intelligent way, way, way back when, before you even had memories. But now it may not be serving you anymore. It may not be intelligent in that way that it actually makes the world safer for you, right? So that's where we want to change things, maybe. But that's up to you, whether it's working for you or not. We can change the parts that aren't working, and we can leave the parts that are working. So we don't have to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can be very strategic and intelligent about it. But again, not if we don't know about attachment styles. Okay, so you believe that other people make you feel secure. Sometimes people with this style are referred to as anxious or needy or clingy. Being alone is often very insecure feeling for you. You don't really like to go out to dinner on your own or movies on your own. That would be like, oh my gosh, no, I would never do that. Are you kidding me? Okay. All right. The dismissing attachment style is sort of the yin and the yang to the anxious attachment style. These folks will often pair up, and it actually makes sense in a lot of ways, because you look at the dismissing has a positive sense of self and a negative sense of other. So they are very self-reliant. They want a partner to sort of tend to them and care for them and sort of be deferential to their needs. So if it's like, "What's for dinner, honey?" the dismissing partner really will say "Well, I want this and this." But the anxious person will say, "Perfect, whatever you want, I'll get you," or "Whatever you want, we will have." They'll put their own opinions and needs aside. The dismissing finds that to be a perfect pairing in their relationship. So you can see why these two would pair up. But the problem is right when the anxious partner really needs the vulnerability and the connection and the attention of the dismissing partner, that's when the dismissing partner cannot do it. That's the exact moment that the dismissing partner sort of disconnects and says, I got to get out of here. They might ghost their partner. They might give the silent treatment. They might, abuse them or emotionally control them in some way, shape, or form. And so even with children, often the dismissing partner is more interested in their own needs and more focused on themselves than their child. So of course the child then feels that cold wind, that neglect of the dismissing partner. So you believe that you are enough. Other people are just sort of complicate things. Sometimes people with this style are referred to as cold or distant or loners. Being emotionally close to others is insecure for you. So this is the land of where narcissism or narcissistic individuals lie, but not everybody with a dismissing attachment pattern is a narcissist. And I think even the phrase narcissist is pretty judgmental. If we understand it from the attachment framework, then all of a sudden we're recognizing that they picked up this strategy, this attachment map of the world, as a survival mechanism. They had to develop a cold, self-reliant streak in them. They had to shut down and suppress certain intense emotions that were not welcome in their primary caregivers in their homes, etc. So, it's often done in the mental health space that we say, "Oh, they're just a narcissist," etc. If you bring it all the way down, what you're recognizing is that was a very intelligent survival strategy by the human body to keep them protected from some type of environment. We'll talk about that in part 2, what was going on, what sets up the dismissing attachment pattern, etc. So withhold your judgments as best you can. Now, it doesn't mean you should remain in a relationship with a narcissist who doesn't want to change, or that if you yourself are narcissistic, that you shouldn't like try to curb some of those tendencies to become and model more of a secure map, because you should. I think everybody should move toward the secure model over their lifetime and try to really repair attachment damage if possible. But it also doesn't mean that we should just sort of like cast aside other people as being dismissible or, undesirables or something like that. Okay. And the last one is a disorganized. And of course it has a secondary name. So disorganized, fearful. I just go with disorganized because it's easy to remember. Anxious, dismissing, and disorganized. It's hard to remember the 2-word names, I think. So the disorganized is sort of a combo of the anxious and the dismissing. If you added these 2 up, you would sort of get a disorganized attachment style. So they have a negative view of self, negative view of other. If they get broken up with, they're shattered, and they feel like completely it's their fault. They might blame the other, but really they take it to a deep, deep core level, and it might trigger, often in the disorganized attachment style, trigger suicidal thoughts and suicidal attempts. So if you or others have had many, many, many suicidal attempts over time, not just one or something like that, but like a pattern of them, that almost guarantees you probably have a disorganized attachment style underneath that. So when they lose a job, when they get broken up with, there's nothing to catch them. They feel like they're just going to fall forever. They cannot, in their own internal schema, in their own attachment map, they cannot rely on other people. Even therapists and things like that, they don't feel like they can really truly rely on other people. They feel like it's just a matter of time before that relationship falls apart too. So it's very hard for them to get help. It's very hard for them to feel secure, or it's very hard for them to feel soothed. And of course, they don't feel like they can do it within themselves, hence the negative view of self. So you believe that being alone is terrifying and being intimate is terrifying. That's like a horrible position for a human to be in. And that's why of all the attachment styles, I feel the most for the disorganized attachment because of that phrase right there. Being alone with yourself is terrifying, but being intimate is also terrifying. It's like, well, then what? You're in a rock and a hard place situation. You can't win either way you go. Hence, again, why self-harming and suicidal attempts and suicidal thoughts are so common in the disorganized attachment, because you're just floating out there all alone. So at least you have some control over getting yourself, out of the playing field, so to speak. Now, in my work, we always want to try to get suicide off the table. That's the goal. You can't just be afraid of suicidal thoughts or suicidal actions, nor can you just ignore them. You have to understand them. And from the attachment frame, they become much more comprehensible, I believe. Sometimes people with this style are referred to as crazy or moody or unpredictable. And life for them often feels very insecure, threatening, and empty, right? So this is, if we pathologize this, if we gave this a name in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, it would be the borderline personality, or the histrionic personality disorders would fall into this category. That gives us, through the attachment frame, that actually gives us a new way to understand borderline personality disorder. It's not just, oh, they're broken or they're crazy. It's like, no, they were in an environment that set up a survival strategy, often a life threat strategy that kept them alive. Their body, their psyche did the most intelligent thing that it possibly could have. Except now as an adult, it makes relationships very challenging. It makes everything much more challenging than it needs to be. And so what we need to do with all three is move ever toward the secure attachment maps. And the good news is we can change the attachment maps. It takes about 6 months to 2 years to fully transform your attachment model. And then your maps of, if you develop a secure attachment model of the world, that will just work better. It makes life less chaotic. It makes relationships easier. So because we develop, and I know it's a tall order to say, oh, just take 6 months or 2 years to develop a new attachment map. But once you do, it's done. And once you do, it just works better. And so you use it more and more. Now, these other attachment maps may still be sort of in there, but if we can build a new attachment model of the world, it will make all of these struggles much, much easier to deal with. And ultimately, and crucially, it'll actually change the epigenetic phenomenon of the next generation of you. So if you have kids, their attachment maps will begin to shift as well as you change yours. Or if you're about to have kids, please get your attachment understanding in order before you have kids, if you can. That will really, really change the world for the better if we can begin to do that type of thing. Okay, that was a lot of information. There's a lot more information in this free 60-page ebook that I call the Owner's Manual Part 2. Go ahead and click the link below. If you just look below this video, you can click it. It'll come to your email. It's perfectly free. I just want to give you more information, and I want to also say thank you for making it this far in the video. If you made it this far, go ahead and collect that ebook. It doesn't cost you anything. That was attachment to what? Now we know to what? Primary caregivers. Your most important map of the world. And it really is, in my opinion, one of the most important maps of the world. It develops earliest out of all the maps that the human psyche builds, and it lasts the longest. I mean, it lasts through most people's life. I should say, I don't think I said, the secure attachment map in America, anyway, United States of America, 50% of adult Americans have a secure attachment. The other 50% have the other 3 insecure models. So think about that. And actually, I think that number might be a little bit different now. I mean, those are a little bit older numbers. But even if we go with that, that means 1 in 2 people that you meet and you know has one of the insecure attachment models, which makes relationships harder, self-esteem harder, their ability to thrive and be creative harder. I mean, it really affects everything in life, right? So in part 2, which will be the next video that we put out in this series, we'll talk about what the primary caregivers were doing to sort of influence the child to have one of those 4 attachment maps. And then we'll also talk about what the adult will be like. Getting a little bit more flavor, getting a little bit more sense of like, what does it feel like to have these attachment maps so that you can potentially understand your own attachment model and then begin to work on it, which may be part 3. I'm not sure, but I think part 3 will be like, how can we begin to change these things? What sort of like practices do we need to do? We'll see where that goes. But until then, thanks so much for watching the video. I appreciate it. If you made it this far, go ahead and give it a like, a subscribe, and the bell. That helps the godlike algorithms of YouTube connect this video to people who might find this video useful. And so that helps the world get a little bit better. That helps our channel grow, of course. But also, if you made it this far, you probably did like the video. So go ahead. It doesn't cost you anything. Just hit the like button. I don't want to ever say smash the like button, but I might because I watch all these YouTube videos and it gets into my brain. I just don't like the phrase smash the like button. I don't like the word smash, I think. Anyway, thanks again. I will talk to you in the next video. Take care of yourselves out there. Bye-bye.